Quite impressed by the attendance for this conference. It's a topic we've been discussing for the last 10 years, and I must say every time I'm re-invited to speak at a records retention class, I'm thinking, well, pretty much all organizations must have figured it out by now. And I'm surprised to see the number of organizations starting to look at records management as we speak. So I think it's going to be quite an interesting session. We have fantastic speakers throughout the day, and I urge you to ask questions as we move forward. I'm giving 2 or 3 conferences like that a week, and the best conferences and where the attendees derive the most content and the most value from the conference is when they interact with the speakers. We're all speaking on the topic quite often. We know the topic well and we know our slides well as well, but we much prefer being taken on a different path and answering the questions that you have, the issues that you're facing, and offer a customized presentation. To start with, I'd like to get a sense of who's attending today, so I'm going to call general functions role within organization. First of all, trying to tell apart private practitioners, people in private practice, mainly lawyers, I would say, records manager. In private practice, I'm thinking law firms. So we're mainly dealing with corporations, in-house counsel, records manager, IT, IM more generally, and the other people are shy. Okay.
No, I'm not so shy.
Okay.
Privacy and freedom of information.
Good point. Any other people in the privacy realm? Laws are starting to have teeth in that market, so there's starting to be a growing interest in managing personal information rather than just piling them up forever, as we used to do and still do. I have to tell you that the sessions are being webcasted, so as much as I invite you to ask questions, if you do ask questions, you need to raise your hand and someone will come with a mic so that people on the webcast can hear the question that you're asking. Otherwise, and I think the room may be a bit crowded to do that, maybe I'm just going to repeat the question and ask the other speakers to ask the question and repeat it for the benefit of people attending online. So good morning, people online. And I don't know if there's any way by which they can themselves ask questions. Yes, they can. So we may be getting questions from them as well. Okay, so the first session today is mine, Best Practices for Creating and Implementing a Successful Records Retention Policy. And I'm just going to look at the time and make sure that I don't take over anyone, because this is a topic that I could talk for between 15 minutes and 2 weeks, but I'm told I only have an hour. So let's get started right now. And I have to say right up front that I won't be focusing so much on the legal aspect of retention, because the following session is on that exact topic. You're going to have 2 speakers talking about the legislative and regulatory environment applicable to records retention. So I'm really going to be focusing on the process itself, how to set up and develop a records retention policy that is going to be implementable. And I'm saying is going to be implementable because we work with corporations on a daily basis where we realize that they do have a records retention policy because the board 5 years, 10 years ago asked that the organization have a record retention policy. However, in most cases, these policies are sleeping on the intranet. No one reads them, and when people do read them, they don't understand them, and when they do understand them, they don't have the tools to automate them. And I don't know for you, but I, for one, would not spend a day every year sitting in front of my computer and just scrolling through my documents thinking, oh, see, a contract that ended 2 weeks ago is going to have to be destroyed in 5 years. I'll get back to that. No one does that, so unless you have tools to automate retention, you won't be successful in implementing your record retention policy. And as I often say, having a document management system or some form of retention management system is akin to having filing cabinets, folders, boxes, archiving room a couple of years ago. No one in this room would have invested in a corporation that tolerated that their employee piled up information on their desk, underneath the desk, in their car, at home. Well, that's exactly what we're doing right now with corporate records in the electronic world. So I think there must be an investment in information management generally, for our purpose, putting in place a record management system, because in 2012, I like to think that it's a cost of doing business. One of my passion is electronic discovery. Unfortunately, it's a bit slow to pick up in Canada because judges are lax. They're not sanctioning organization much compared to what we see elsewhere. And lawyers tend to be a bit complacent with each other, so they're not requiring hardcore discovery as we see it in other jurisdictions. But I think there is a need to invest in information management, and in the relatively short term, what we're going to be starting to see is what we've seen in the UK, in Australia, in the US, is judges saying that they don't care what the cost of discovering electronic document is, even though there are proportionality rules, accessibility rules, etc., that apply in most jurisdictions. If corporations are not investing upfront in proactively managing their information, then they have to pay the cost after the fact. And I can tell you in some cases it's quite messy. So first of all, what's the context? And I'm the opening speaker, so I'll talk a bit generally. I think the momentum, what we're seeing in many organizations that are now looking at records retention, is recognition that we're all overloaded with information. We all need to look at our inbox. I have a little Xobni app on my inbox, and I receive on average 273 email per the stats that I have this morning, and I reply to about 1/3 of all these emails. Well, if I have to manually save all these emails, and particularly if I don't have a system to do that and I need to scroll down in folders and sub folders, I can pretty much spend half of my day just dealing with emails and accomplish not much else. So I think most employees, particularly employees in the knowledge sector that have knowledge-based profession, need these tools. There's a stat that came out a couple of years ago by Gartner, I think it was about 3 years ago, where they were saying that the average knowledge worker spends about 30% of its time searching for information. So I wrote to Belinda, who was the analyst who wrote that piece, and I asked why search, and she said because they're not finding. So even worse, not only are we spending about 30% of our time, and therefore 30% of the salary that your corporation are paying to the employees goes to search, they do not find what they're looking for, so they reinvent the wheel, thereby spending even more time. And today, I like to think that most organization, most valuable asset is information. So we spend a great deal of energy looking at all the other assets that we own. And I was in Calgary last week talking to CFOs in the energy sector. And obviously, they're quite interested in their resources. However, they were all quite quick to acknowledge that these resources were short-term revenues. What had the most value to them was the information they had about the properties that they own, the right they have in other locations where they're currently not exploiting. But the more information they have about these properties, the more they can make the right decision to decide to exploit one land instead of another one, etc. So information truly is the most valuable asset of many corporations nowadays. The other reason why we care about retention is because we've realized that what IT was telling us, and sorry for folks in the IT department, I don't mean to be harsh here, we've been told that memory is cheap. And it is. Prices for memories are steadily going down so we can pile up information. However, what they forgot to tell us, and that's because they didn't know, because they're focused on storage, they're focused on the network, they're not focused on the content. These IT people were not aware that at some point we all reach a breaking point. For corporation, it's when you have so much information that you cannot tell apart the good from the bad. And I've experienced that when I was at Bell Canada. And that's one of the reasons why I invested so much time and energy around information management. I was a litigator. I had no clue what information management was until I understood what mismanagement of information was. The reason I'm saying that is, as a litigator, we rely on testimony and documentary evidence. Within organizations such as Bell, there's a lot of staff turnaround.